Hey guys, Coach Mike here, and today we're going to talk about Food Labeling 101. Now, what do I mean by Food Labeling 101? When you walk into the grocery store and you're surrounded by thousands and thousands and thousands of products, it's almost like impossible to try and decipher some of the ingredients lists on the back of the labeling. And sometimes we don't even check, right? But since we're doing a macros program here and we need to be just more self-aware of what we're seeing when we're in the grocery store, we're gonna go over a quick nutritional label ourselves, okay? So now we're gonna move on to a nutritional label itself. Up here on the board, I've got a nutritional label kind of laid out for us, and we're gonna talk about it step by step, okay? So when you first see the nutrition label, just below nutrition facts, you'll see serving sizes. Now we've talked a little bit about serving sizes when it comes to your macros and logging. The gram portion is the portion that we can weigh versus the dry measure portion, which may be a tablespoon, a teaspoon, a cup, a half a cup, so on and so forth. These are two ways of measuring what exactly this nutrition label is telling you. Everything that you see that's put out on this label is always going to be based off of exactly what's on the top. So for this example nutrition label, I have a half a cup serving size or 40 grams of dry product. That doesn't mean when it's cooked, okay? So when I measure it out dry, every half cup is going to be a reading off of this nutritional label, okay? The servings per container are about 30 for this container. So that's a very important piece of smaller, high density caloric foods. These servings per size, container, box, bag, you name it, are always going to kind of fluctuate depending on the company and how they want their nutrition label to work. It's very advertising and marketing. So what we want to do is make sure that we're keeping ourselves in the ranges that we want to be in, not letting the serving size per container control us. So if I have an item like a Snickers bar per se that's 350 calories per serving, but the bar is 2 servings and it's 700 calories. I don't know if that's true. I'm just kind of throwing these numbers out. We know that Snickers bar altogether, which you're most likely to eat rather than just half the bar, because who eats half of a Snickers bar, is going to be 700 calories, okay? So just keep that in mind. If I were to eat 30 servings of this, I would end up very bloated and with a lot of calories in my belly, okay? So half a cup, 30 servings. Now we're gonna go down to calories. Remember, calories are per serving here. So 150 calories per serving, not bad, right? Especially when I start to look further down the list and see that I can get some carbohydrates in from this item. The calories, and then you'll see calories from fat. Now calories from fat really isn't that important. What we're looking more at is the grams of fat that are contained within the product that we're using. We can get the calories ourselves. Back when we did macros, we saw that we can get the calories of what we need for fat each day, and that's really what mattered to us. This was just put on here because there used to be a big fat epidemic in the 80s where people were panicking about, you know, high fat this and high fat that, and all I need to do is go low fat this, low fat that. And so what happened, calories, from fat were thrown up on the nutritional labeling, even though it really doesn't matter how many calories are coming from fat. We'll know if it's a high fat food or not just by looking at the calories from the grams themselves, okay? So anyways, we're dropping down to total fat next. So total fat is gonna show you all fat within the product, and some companies break this down, some do not. When it comes to grams, no company has to report if their item is below 0.5 grams for a given type of macronutrient or even micronutrient, depending on what they're listing within the product, okay? So if there's less than half a gram of fat in said product, then they don't have to label that there's less than half a gram of fat in that said product, okay? It also holds true for everything else down the list when it comes to expressing what it is that's within the product, okay? So saturated fat, so here we have total fat is 2.5, saturated fat 0.5, trans fat 0 grams. Now, obviously they didn't report all the fat to us here, okay? There is no mono or polyunsaturated fat, which you'll see I have right over here as listed options as well. Some companies will put poly and monounsaturated fats if they're within the product, which are basically easier to break down in your body than some of the trans fats that are formed through manufacturing processes. They'll be on there as well, but we would ideally like the total fat to add up from saturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, monounsaturated fat, and trans fat, okay? Note that some of the 0.5s will show up too if a combination of fats that are below 0.5 add up to be into that 0.5 range. You'll see it show up in the total fat. Now, something to note when it comes to these percentages of daily values, all these percentages are based off of a 2,000 calorie diet. And that's, when we go back to BMR, that 2,000 calories is not a standard pretty much for anybody. It's just a nice round number that we can use, or that the FDA can use during these labeling practices to keep the numbers round. Now, these are gonna vary for each individual, so I almost don't even want you to pay attention to these percentages. They're there, but what we're more concerned with is the grams and not so much the percentages, because they don't stick with you. You have your own caloric expenditure, you have your own BMR, and your percentages are gonna waver off of that, okay? So just pay attention to those grams there. And watch out for these trans fats as well. These are manufactured fats in most cases, unless they're naturally occurring in animals, in which they're not gonna be really labeled because they're naturally occurring. So trans fat, if you see anything that has that on it, let's try to avoid that product pretty much at all costs. Even if we're trying to be in macros, it's just a dangerous, we've seen in research, a dangerous compound to have in your body when it comes to high blood pressure and stroke and different types of circulatory issues, okay? And then we're gonna drop down to cholesterol. You'll see this is labeled in milligrams always. Cholesterol isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's a precursor hormone. We'll talk about that more later. Sodium, you do wanna watch sodium intakes. It has been linked to higher blood pressure, but we wanna see that usually below 2,000 milligrams per day, but it can be up for athletes because some athletes go through a lot more electrolytes. Again, we'll talk about that in some more of our performance sections. Total carbohydrate, again, here's your second macro that's listed on the nutritional label, okay? Again, stay away from those percentages. And you're gonna see it done in grams, and it's gonna be broken down as well. So 27 grams in this product here for every half cup serving, remember. Your dietary fiber is going to be 4 grams, okay? So there's a few different ways that some coaches go about talking about dietary fiber. One of those ways is subtracting it from your total carbohydrates, because dietary fiber kind of sludges up the process or takes longer to go through your system than something that's a simple sugar or a quick release carbohydrate. So having these fibrous foods in your diet for that kind of starchier, slow release, not pre-workout, not post-workout, type fuel or feed is better versus having this during outside that window, okay, which is going to be optimal. So 4 grams dietary fiber in this one. Again, it means it's going to be a little heavier on the stomach, if you will. And also keeping in mind that this is also broken down. I thought I had it up here, but I actually have it right here. Soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. All that means is when it's insoluble, it's not digested in water, or it doesn't kind of combine with the water to come out of your body, unlike soluble fiber, which is soluble within water, okay? So that's the only difference between the two. One can carry through with water, one kind of like builds up a little bit more. Don't worry, that's not a bad thing. It helps things move through your intestines, keep your intestines clean, keep your gut bacteria very, very healthy. So having that fiber along is extremely helpful. Some people minus fiber from carbohydrate, like I was starting to mention there. So some people consider 23 grams is what this would be of usable carbohydrate versus that 4 grams of dietary fiber that's attached. Very common in fruit, vegetables, so on and so forth. That's why some people call them free calories that you can get, but there's no free calories, there's only calories. So energy for your life, basically. So vitamins and minerals will also be listed. Those will be after this whole list, but the one that we're really focused on right now, sugars. Try to keep those on either teams or by yourself below 50 grams a day. We want to try and stay that sugar intake. We want to try and stay below 50. We find that to be a good kind of benchmark for keeping people away from spiking their blood sugar various times throughout the day, okay? And protein, remember, we usually base those macro numbers off of protein first, and then we kind of let everything fall into place after, especially when you guys are mainly athletes or going into some type of exercise regimen when we put you through this program. Okay, so here we see 5 grams of protein and no percentage, because even some labelers don't see that that is one of the recommendations that's required here, okay? And that, again, 2,000 calorie diet is what we would base that off if we were throwing a percentage on it, okay? And then vitamins and minerals, as I briefly mentioned there, I wanted to make sure I got to this others group for you. Vitamins and minerals are going to be listed below, and sometimes those numbers can vary around as well. We're not going to go as in depth to those. We will talk about in our separate groups, or maybe even one of our videos here, we will talk about some of those nutrients and what they can do for us. But that's not as important in this macro assessment as keeping those calories under control. We don't want to overwhelm you here in the beginning, but we want to show you how to go through these simple steps in everyday life and how you can be effective without overthinking your food choices, okay? So again, vitamins, minerals, and then you'll see your ingredients list. Now, I don't have enough time in Food Labeling 101 to go through all the ingredients lists that you could possibly see on the back of a product, but we try to keep it to some simple rules. If it contains 10 ingredients or less, all which you can pronounce, it's probably a pretty good food choice. If it contains more than 10 ingredients and more than 4 to 5, even in some cases 1, depending on how many ingredients there are, that you can't pronounce, chances are, with your choices, it may not be the best food choice for you, just based off of it not being a wholesome food that can nourish your body versus react with your body in a negative manner, okay? So just keep an eye on those ingredients lists. It's something that I want you to be aware of here to start, but not to obsess over, okay? We just want to make sure that we're pronouncing what it is that we're eating. This is Food Labeling 101. We're going to get into some more advanced stuff here as we move along. Let us know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns with food labeling. And we're going to move on to the grocery store here within the next few days so we can show you how to shop through and give you some examples of these food labels, okay? Now, here's the kicker. At the very end, if you made it to the end of this video, if you can tell me what food label this is from, and it just has to be the type of food, you're going to go ahead and earn 100 extra points for your team this week, okay? So this is one of your rapid fire rounds. Good luck out there. Let me know what this is that I put up.